Hello and welcome to the 6th edition of the QA show. I am joined today by Jack the narrator and probably later on by Codno. We are here to answer your questions related to Civilization 6, the mods we use, or the CPL community in general. Please use the CPL QA show channel or the stream chat for any questions. This week we announced the Gathering Storm Players Tournament. It's FFA based tournament. It's gonna be played starting the 31st of January with 1 or 2 games per day. You can actually see the schedule in under the tournaments tab called GSPC schedule and reservations. There you can actually reply on that channel and tell our moderators when you want to play, so we can add you on the slot in the day you want to play. The first one, only the first one that wins in one game can go further on into the tournament. So it's gonna be quite a tough battle to get the first place in most games. If we actually added a little bit of spice in there, and we said that it's allowed that you can have one friendship or one alliance at some point. So it's gonna be interesting who will ally and who will help someone else to get the first place there. We got a lot of questions earlier this week by a new player called Mondala. He mostly played on the PBC scene, that's the play by cloud category we have here. And I'm gonna put up the text on the main screen here. Give me a second. Yeah, there we go. So let's see what he asked. I've enjoyed multiplayer, but fear I'll never be good enough to compete. Might have to stick to cloud or single player. That said, I'm okay not winning, but also don't want to get destroyed all the time, even when I do 75% of the right moves, quote unquote, in the right moves. And don't want to trigger a snowball effect that affects others' score game. It feels like you need to make 97% of the right moves to survive in a free-for-all game. I obviously need more gameplay and lessons learned to process the multiplayer plays and manage balance, defense, expansions, etc. But it always seems I'm 5 turns away from the appropriate defense to an attack. Then other games, you do the right or defend reasonable and have an okay game going, it just gets CC'd. So a newbie trying to develop their game, this good game of theirs, might be a 1 in 10 and now it's just over to CC. That's a concede. Survival of the fittest is fair, but not everyone is going to process the meta, efficiency, strategy, inner workings of the game at the level a lot of CPL vets do. I watch the streams and understand the meta efficiencies required to play well, but I just cannot execute them. So, as to give my 2 cents about this, I do think Civilization 6 has quite a steep learning curve. You're gonna need a lot of experience to actually catch up with the veterans, but in the end, we are all here to help. So that's why we actually created this community, so we can help each other. The mods, the coaches, even other players I think most of them will happily answer your questions about what to do and how to do it. It's not easy, but getting experience, it's the way to go. And I would like to say, but I cannot say that the single player experience will give you that experience. Unfortunately, the artificial intelligence of the single player mode is not up to the challenge of actually pushing you further on your learning curve. So basically, playing against other players, you encounter different strategies, you will encounter different unit compositions, you will encounter different timings than regular AI will do in a game, mostly because it's a constant orchestrated attack. That's a lot different than an AI will put up. It's not coded to be, let's say, quote unquote smart. It is mostly coded to overwhelm. So that's why you will be pushed to do that. But take it like a learning experience every time you win or lose a game. This is one of the beauties of this game. This is why most of us, I think, play here. We are here to enjoy the randomness. We are here to enjoy the everyday lesson we're gonna learn. We are here to enjoy each other's company and have a laugh while we do some diplomacy in a Deeper Plus game, or in teamers when we coordinate an attack on some other player, or we talk with the streams, with the viewers on the streams. So I do think we made some advances in this, especially with the novice lobbies that we're hosting most of the time. That's a way for new players to actually play with each other instead of having to be eaten, or let's say yeah, eaten, I think, is the best word here, by veteran players. That's why we actually have a thing now called formal challenge. It's because the veteran players weren't playing between themselves enough or challenging themselves enough, so we needed some mechanic to make them play against each other, because they were pushing their strengths on the lower skilled players. So let's see what else you asked us here. I have an idea that might help a wider range of skill levels build a civilization in the multiplayer experience and have it stand the test of time, as well as be a tool against runaway civs in any victory condition, and create more constraints to counter victory types or fireworks, or dramatic conclusions if a leader tries to push score instead of victory condition versus an early CC, and prevent snowballing. Well, snowballing is not actually a thing anymore. A year ago, yeah, it was a thing. I totally agree with you. We had so many players that if they managed to attack their neighbor, eat him, and then just kept on going to the other neighbor and so on. Yeah, that was usually when the game was CC'd before turn 60 sometimes. Now I think we reached a balance between how Firaxis managed to get the right mechanics with Victor, and what CodeNode did with the mod. That was one of the basic ideas of the mod. So we have a game that can be neutral most of the time, but have enough diversity through the civilization picks that you do. It was at the beginning, the vanilla gameplay was some sort of rock, paper, scissors at the beginning, at the start. When you were in the leader screen, you had to pick a leader that was countering another leader, basically. So what the BBG did was level the playing field on most civilizations by lowering their buffs and upping their weaknesses. Hello, Kodna. I noticed you joined us here. You wanna pitch in on how we did that?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say that snowballing is completely gone and eliminated from the game. BBG is constantly a moving target, and we've just reduced it to where there are certain things that will maybe slow down a Civ snowball to make them more fair, and things of that nature. Can I ask which question you're actually on? Are you on the premise or one of the numbered questions?
I'm on the third. Wait.
The third question? I only see two in this file you sent.
I just highlighted.
Okay. Anyway, yeah. So we nerfed some civs. We started by nerfing the ones that were always banned because they just have abilities that don't work in multiplayer, like Persia getting +2 movement whenever they declare a surprise war. That can be exploited, and reused multiple times in multiplayer. Australia had something similar, and et cetera, et cetera. So we basically just made all the civs. The goal was to make all the civs playable, and then after we did that, we tried to balance things out. And so we've touched everything from religion to pantheons to buildings to unique units to regular units, pretty much everything across the board.
Does the BBG mod work with Play by Cloud and the other platforms?
It
Yes,
does.
it does work with Play by Cloud. I'm told, and well, I've been told sort of conflicting things. I've heard that it updates as people load the saves, that they'll get the latest version of BBG. But I've also seen people show me that they're on a backdated version. So I think it's probably that whatever you start the game with is the version you will have the entire time.
So basically, if a game started 4 months ago, they're a little bit out of touch with our new BBG version.
Yeah, exactly. They might not have some buff for a civ they're playing, or they might not have some nerf for a civ.
Okay. Well, the next question was about CCing and slash score hoarding. And I guess there is not a lot to say here. Of course, FFA will be dominated always by either a victory condition or a score. And since we, like most players, do not want to spend 8 hours to actually get to space or get a culture victory when someone is actually defending it, we implemented the CC, the concede mechanic, so players can actually finish the game way earlier. If a player is decidedly the first one and the other players agree to give him the win, that's what's gonna happen. The randomness of the spawns are always a factor in this, and we cannot do much about that. That's one of the things that I think most players like about this game, comparing it to, let's say, StarCraft 2 or other games that have a set map. I believe the randomness has a beauty in itself. It's always, sorry.
Go ahead, finish up.
It always shows the adaptability of a player or the civilization to improve the land in such a way that he can be competitive even with let's say medium to low spawn.
Sorry for interrupting there. I was just going to say score is something that is another thing that we touch in BBG. We've just recently started tweaking it. We're trying to get it right. Score whoring, as they call it, doing things towards the end of the game or when a CC is likely to bump up your score quickly is something that people do. I wouldn't say it's rampant. I think most people just probably play their game and aren't really thinking explicitly about I need to do this to get 5 extra points or things of that nature. But we've tried to reduce some of the scoring metrics to make it harder and less incentivized to do this. And we've restarted a conversation after making those changes last month's BBG update, because we're still seeing that some of the metrics that determine how well you're actually doing in the game, what your chances of winning the game are, how you really stand, are not driving a lot of the score. And it's sometimes arbitrary things like I don't know, the number of wonders you've created or how much population you have. And indirectly, those do have an effect on how well you're doing in the game and how you might finish in the game. But things like techs and civics are like the primary direct factors as to whether you're going to hit one of those major victory conditions. And so we're looking at maybe upping that score in the next version of BBG.
I'm just gonna pitch in here regarding the randomness of spawns because essentially BBS is kind of making that a little bit more balanced. It's not perfect. I mean, if you spend time on the BBS section, you would see that you always find some people complain it's not balanced as much as it should be, or it's too balanced for some other players. But you contrary, I would say, to the base game, at least you will have a fighting chance. You will not, start with Dido and spawn in the middle of snow at the bottom of the map. And as well for strategic resources, we are always going to give you at least the two strategic resources that correspond to your starting era. So if you do an ancient start, which is the norm on the server, you will get horses and iron not far away from your spawn. So there are little things that we're doing to try to keep the game random, but at least balanced somehow and enjoyable, so you're not too much as the disadvantage versus the other players.
Well, I do think there's a lot of diversity we have right now, especially with the civilization picks that we're seeing. I believe from the latest statistics, we do not have that many constant bans, right? Kono, we mostly fixed that with the BBG.
In free-for-all, we're seeing maybe one ban per game. That's what I've noticed. It's been a little bit since I looked deeply into it, but I think that pretty much in mostly all free-for-alls, little to no bans are happening.
Yeah. Also, Fire Access came and helped the gameplay a lot with changes to the coral reefs that give bonuses now and actually make naval civs a lot more attractive. Then we added the holy site mechanics, right? So many buffs to religions and stuff that give you faith in general. So that's always a way to go. It used to be so few options for the civilizations to go monumentality, but right now most of the time you can reach that with all civs, as middle student showed us the great Zulu that went culture victory.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I first started at the community, we were only doing science victory and military. Like there was no thought of doing culture victories. There was no thought of doing religious victories. There still really isn't much of a thought of religious victories, but it was just very one direction.
Yeah. And how many times did you pick pen, brush, or voice and monumentality over free inquiry back in the day? I mean,
Yeah, exactly. Like there was not, the game was not diverse, is the way I like.
yeah. So going to the next question, we got less skilled players or certain civs with different growth curves, Mali in the brackets, or victory condition goals, religion slash culture to some degree, sometimes have less ability to defend themselves. Well, I think that's one of the things that you have to take into account with whenever you go culture victory, you're gonna need either a powerful ally to help you get there. That's actually gonna not backstab you. Uh, and another, you actually need to get the techs to achieve culture victory to get to the final screen. So it's a combination of a lot of things. That's what actually makes it beautiful, but at the same time, it's really hard. So I don't think we need to buff or debuff that, but I believe in the, let's say, novice games, the ones that, let's say, are not that experienced in countering culture victory, or trying to let's say get to nukes to destroy the spaceports of someone that goes to space, or in the case of religion, knowing how to defend or place units to actually condemn the religious units that are coming to get your city, then having enough faith and knowing how much faith you need to counter that. Even though I rarely see it, usually it's a dual thing, or a dual type of gameplay thing with the religious victory. I've seen it sometimes in 2v2s, but so rarely in 5v5s or 6v6, because it's extremely hard to get that much religion spread to most of the world. We're talking about huge maps there, or bigger. So it's extremely hard to get so many cities converted to your religion.
Yeah, and I would just say on this, BBG tries to balance the victory conditions. We believe or at least I personally believe, that each victory condition should have its pros and its cons. If you go straight science victory and you don't work on your culture, then you're not going to be able to defend culture victory very well. If you do culture and you neglect science, you're not going to be able to get there either, because there's some milestones that you need to hit on the science tree in order to become basically unstoppable with the culture victory. And I'm talking about computers, for example. Um, religion's a tough one. I'm not sure. In some ways, yes, you're vulnerable. Uh, but in other ways, once you hit that tier 3 government, if you're generating lots of faith, you can protect yourself by faith purchasing units. Um, the other thing I would say, Molly's mentioned in this question specifically, and they talk about civs with different growth curves. Civs are the same way. There's pros and cons to each civ. Some civs are really straightforward, like build campuses and commercial hubs and see how far you get. Other civs, like Mali and some of the other Gathering Storm civs, require a little bit more skill and nuance in using them. And so Mali is one where if you're playing against Mali, you need to try and pressure them early when they're vulnerable, because later on they get so strong that it's very hard to take them out.
Maybe something I could make me reflect on what you guys are saying, and it's something I realized when I joined CPL, which was more than 6 months ago now. When you are playing Civilization versus the computer, even if you're on deity, very often you don't really follow a path. What I mean is that you don't really have a plan. And this is probably the biggest difference you have with playing on this server, is that you need relatively quickly to make a plan on how you're going to win the game. And when you're saying that somehow you're going to be, vulnerable, that's the logic of it. But players at low level don't see that. Why? Because guess what? They have theater squares, they have campuses, they have a little bit of everything, and they have a shot at nothing. And this is really the biggest step to then be able to have a fighting chance in the FFA. And I'm telling you that while so far I've never won. So, but that, I mean, as a new player, that's probably one comment. You need to have a plan when you're playing there, and you're probably gonna lose even if you're playing a novice game, because it's called novice. But guess what? Most people there will have already beaten the game in deity easily versus a computer. So for you, when you are playing on this server, you really need to try to sharpen your tools and build a plan. Do you want to go for culture victory? Do you have a sieve that is suited for that, or are you going to go science? And then if you go science, you're probably not going to build dozens of theater squares.
And not only is your Civ suited for that victory condition, but is your spawn and where you are in the map and your neighbors and all this other information, does that also lend itself to the type of victory condition you want to go towards, or that your Civ is aimed for? And this kind of also leads into, I guess, the first question that maybe I missed here was, someone had said that they enjoy multiplayer, but they were scared because they feel like they're good, but they're not good enough to compete. And so there's lots of tips we can give people, and sort of in what Jack was talking about. One of the things that I like to tell new players is, if you want something, if you need something for your gameplay, like let's say a classical great general, you need to go for it right away and make sure that you get it, because if you don't, you'll end up just procrastinating until it's either irrelevant to your game or someone else has taken it and it no longer helps you. Um, the other thing I can tell, novice players, is that the first thing you should learn is how to defend yourself. Don't try and think, oh, I'm going to kill this guy in my 5th game in CPL, my neighbor. Just try and build units and defend your own civ. And once you've gotten good at defending yourself, then you can try to figure out the intricacies of attacking someone.
I've also seen a trend that's becoming in the last few months, especially with the updates. We've reached a point of knowledge, I believe, between most players here, that word, extremely early word, is punishing the players that actually do it, because if you do not guarantee a quick kill, the players that will sim alone and have the space to sim alone, especially now with the BBS that gives them that space they need and the terrain they need, will most likely go ahead of you anyway. So you have to take a really hard decision and think about if you're gonna get ahead, even if you take 2 or 3 or 4 or 6 or 7 cities, and how long it will take to do that, because that's always a question that's gonna be bothering you.
Yeah, especially in Gathering Storm, Firaxis has made war even more risky. And so you need to be sure, like, this person I'm attacking is just not expecting it at all. Or I've simmed up enough to create enough of an error gap between our units and quantity of units that I can take them out quickly. Um, it's extremely rewarding. You know, instead of like building settlers and making cities with those settlers and those settlers are gone, you make units and you take cities with the production that you put into those units, and those units persist and get stronger and you take more cities with them. So those are kind of the two strategies for expanding in throughout the early game and also throughout the entire game.
And war most of the time is about two things: one, having the tech advantage, or two, having number superiority. If you have the tech advantage, the window you're going to have that tech advantage is going to be probably small, let's say 5 to 10 turns on an average. So you're going to have to really time it well to your opponent's capability of defending. And on the other hand, if you go for number superiority, it's going to be really hard on your economy. Like the way the units will need to be paid, right? So they don't go into, they don't disappear from your draft, from your civilization. You're gonna need to make a lot of commercials to counter that. I've seen players that especially now in the last few weeks on stream, have gone into negative so many times I cannot even count. Not They're always going for that meta we were used to a few months ago, when we could have built so many units, and the commercials were paying for themselves. But right now, if you don't go, let's say, pen brush and voice with campuses and like a lot of campuses, you're gonna get punished in the mid to late game.
Yeah, and I would build upon that as the game progresses, the difference between, you know, how your tech advantage actually needs to grow. So in the early game, if you get to swords a lot quicker than your neighbor gets to a classical unit, you know, maybe they divert and do pottery and campus and then holy sites, and you know, they're not beelining for one of those classical units like aggressive player might be. You can kill someone with just that small tech advantage. But as the game gets later on, you actually need like 2 eras of tech difference, like you know, tanks to take out lots of fields, and musketeers and such things like that, or planes to take out uh, someone that has steel walls and things of that nature. So keep that in mind too as you're playing the game. Um, the other thing is on the note you mentioned about like gold and economies and stuff like that. People, one of the things I struggle with is getting out of my patterns. Is that I'll play a game and I'll think I need to build these districts and do things this way, or like I always use the same government plaza building. But get out of your patterns. Try the different buildings. You know, we've done a lot of work in BBG to try and make things good for all scenarios. So there's a building in your government plaza that helps with gold for units. Um, and I feel like not a lot of people take that, even when they plan on warring a lot in their games. Um, and then one more piece of advice for new players that want to do war is you gotta get these. You gotta realize that even though, like, let's say you need crossbows, right, to either defend or attack. Every single turn that you can make up to get there creates a wider gap for you to be able to close the kill, as we were talking about earlier, in like killing players quickly so that you don't Aurel yourself. So like if I go straight for swords from the start of the game, there's a couple things that can happen. I'll probably get a general, to go along with my swords, and I will have swords and have X number of turns uh, before my opponent gets a classical unit because they've maybe gone for holy sites like I mentioned earlier, or maybe they didn't get the boost for bronze working, or maybe they didn't get the boost for iron working, um, something along those lines. Or even let's say you go apprenticeship before you go crossbows. Like if you're going to war someone, you're procrastinating that. And it goes back to my point before. If you want to do something, you need to go right for it. And you might say, oh, one turn's not going to matter, but these turns add up over time and they can really cost you. And one of the ways you'll see that is if you play the CPL challenge and you play the game to its end state, and you'll see, oh man, I missed beating this other guy that played the same game by 6 turns. Let me try. Oh, I missed it by 4 turns. And you realize that something you did way early on in the game has caused you to not win this game and beat this person that you're trying to beat in the CPL challenge.
I think that's about sums it up. He talked about and asked us a bit about buffing emergencies. I'm not sure if he knows how emergencies were when they first were introduced by Firaxis, but it was like we kind of needed to ban them right away. There were emergencies whenever a player took another city, another player's capital city. So whenever that happened, there was a really big chance if we accepted that emergency to take the city back to get a lot of gold out of it. So basically we had like 40 or turn 40, turn 50, 1800 gold out of an emergency or some stupid like that. So we were just moving the gold around to the player that was pre-building units to get, and he was like highest in science, to get the units needed 2 ticks above the other player to just roll over the other ones. It was a very weird mechanic that we had to somehow abolish from the game. I'm not sure exactly how we can do that or how Firaxis can give them back. Right now, I believe in Teamers they're still banned. They don't have the same effect, but we still don't allow them, especially because of the gold mechanic that they can allow another team to have. And the last part was about grievances, and grievances from what we know in an FFA type and well in all multiplayer don't really have an effect. I guess maybe we can think about doing something with city states. So let's say if you hit a certain amount of grievance, you cannot you cannot seize it anymore, or you need double the envoys or stuff like that. I guess that's a possibility. I'm not sure if we really want to go into that.
Yeah, I don't know. It would be nice. I agree with some people that I've read recently that say grievances should be part of the multiplayer experience, but I'm not really sure. I haven't looked into how we can make it that, what sort of edits we could make to it, and how we could manipulate it to be part of the multiplayer experience. But I do agree that it's something we should look into.
Yep. And let's get to Jack right now. I understand he has been working a lot on a mod called CPL Helper that will actually improve our game life.
Yeah, it's not finished yet, but I'd say it's stable enough to be used, at least in ranked, on the ladder. So what this mod is all about is a couple of things. So initially, the idea was to avoid relobbying, because that's something which is quite irritating. I play FFA quite rarely, but because I don't have much time, so that's why I'm mostly a PBC guy. But when I'm able to get that 2 or 3 hours or 4 hours in a weekend dedicated to civilization, the last thing I want is spend 45 minutes in lobbies. And unfortunately, it's something that can happen because of remap, because as well when you desync, the AI move your units and everything. And the first goal was to try to find a way so that when someone is dropping or when you remap, you don't have to relobby. So that was the first goal of the CPL helper. And by tinkering around that, I realized we could do more in it, and essentially the idea was to replicate in the lobby. So when you first set up your game, all the options you are voting on when you are doing the bot command. So essentially, this will allow the game to naturally enforce the rules we're using on CPL. So you can't trade with the AI, for instance. You can select how many friendships you can have at the same time. You can ban gold trading. You can only allow strategic resources trading. You can say, "Oh, I only want to trade between lives." So you have a few little things like this. And the other thing as well that was recently added is a couple of options to reflect tournaments that happen in the past in CPL. So you have like an Iron Man type of mode, which is a nod to the comment that the player was saying in his range of questions. So Iron Man means you can't concede, so you will really have to play till the end your game. And you have sudden death, which is essentially going to eliminate the lowest players in scores, making them irrelevant as the number of turns passes. Um, and that I would say is the bulk of the mod. The way it work is relatively simple. You I mean, like any other mold, you go on Steam, you subscribe to it, and then you can launch your game, and the host is going to have access to the option. Or if it's a tournament, it could be a spectator, it could be the person casting. And you see the chat panel you have on the side, on the left side, when you're playing, where you can chat with the players. What you will be able to do in this chat panel is just enter the series of comments. So the same way using the bot on Discord, you can type dot comments and you will have the list of things you can do. So if you're a player, you can basically ask to be made irrelevant, you can ask a concede, you can ask a scrap vote, and then the host can reply by saying, okay, I'm gonna allow you to run this vote. So a vote is going to be held, and you will have to, pretty much the same way where were doing pluses and minuses before. This time is going to be um, in a more formal way. So you still have to do plus and minuses, but for instance, you can't type anything else. It's anonymous, and then you get the result at the end. And that's it in a nutshell. So it's still in development, still in beta. At the moment, there are a couple of more things that needs to be implemented, like having a timers, so that when some people are dropping after 10 minutes, either there is a sub, or basically the guy would be there would be a vote to make the guy irrelevant. So this type of things that are specificities of our rules that are still not implemented. But I would say for the um, basic rules, so no training with AI, limited friendships, how many city stakes you can raise. It's fully working, and you can test it.
That is actually amazing. It will, I believe, it will change a lot of our game life in general, where we're gonna think about our games in FFAs and in teamers. And I'm slowly remembering how it was when the first mods for the competitive CS:GO scene came out, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with how Faceit works and how it pushes its rules into the servers as well. They hard code their rules.
I don't know this one in particular, but I remember, a long time ago, so before CS:GO, before Source even, there was a couple of modes that were used in order to run small tournaments, and it's actually it's not really the same thing, but it takes the same idea. So you have a set of commands where players can use them, and for the host or the person moderating a tournament, you have a little bit more commands at your disposal. For you, basically, Michael, it can make you a mini god when you're going to spectate a tournament, because you can basically say, okay, I'm launching the remap on turn 8 or turn 12 or whatever. then the two teams are voting, and then you know the results, and then you simply tap restart, and they can restart straight away another game. So it makes the experience more fluid, and less lobbying, because no one wants Civ to be a lobby simulator.
Oh, I totally agree with you there. I don't really want to tell you how many minutes I've spent relobbying in the last few weeks when I commented on the 2v2 tournament, but the rule they implemented with the one remap option per team, and most of the times the teams were going for that remap option because they wanted to do like the casino style, remap.
Yeah.
Maybe they get a better spawn, maybe they get an awesome spawn, and
And many times they did not.
yeah, it was,
Which
oh
was
my
kind
god.
of funny. Yeah. I remember. I think it was. I don't know who was playing. Maybe it was Gary or Tom Raider. It was like one of those famous player, and they asked, and they had chocolate hills that were not discovered, but we could see them, right, because with a spectator, and they could not, and they should have
Yes.
played at that, but which is part of the experience as well, because you want the players to root and say, oh, okay, are they going to remap, will they not, and so on. So I mean, yeah, the idea basically is to try to make the game a little bit better. The, Obviously, my personal motive for doing that is that I don't have many times to play, and when play FFA, I would like it to be quite efficient. So if I need to spend like 2 hours coding in order for this to be true, I think it's worth putting the effort there. Um, and one thing that I'm trying to work on at the moment, and uh, it's a bit difficult to implement, but it will be because that's another thing that is annoying me when I play, is that when someone is like last moving, first moving you because he has a better connection, it seems so unfair. So I'm trying to find a way to prevent that, so that if someone is attacking in the last, let's say, takes 10 seconds of a turn, then basically at the beginning of the next turn, uh, he will have a maluses for a couple of seconds, which will incentivize him to not try to do those kind of last move, first move, and try to help out. But that everything will be optional at the end, and you would have toggle for everything. But I suspect a couple of options will be basically taken as standard going forward.
And you're gonna make a lot of friends if you're gonna and enemies in the long term. If you're gonna wanna change that, we have a lot of players that actually made their name out of last moves and first moves here, and knowing when to do them and exactly how many units you need to do the last moves and first moves with. At the same time, I believe that it should be changed. I know there was a rule, especially in the Russian server, going against this type of behavior, um, because it gave the player um, unnatural advantage. The defending player couldn't promote his units like or move them around, switch them with a, let's say, healthy unit from behind, and promote the one that got beaten up. That was considered unnatural or not fair. At the same time, I'm not sure if maybe we can synchronize the timing. So let's say a player loads slowly. He's the weakest link in the lobby. Maybe we can synchronize all the loading times with that player. So the timer for the next turn starts at the same
Yeah,
time.
that's super difficult. When I try, just for instance, just to be able to reload a map uh, from within the game is not easy to implement, because when it comes to loading or network mechanics, obviously it's another layer of complexity, and there is not many things that are exposed in the source code, so there is not many things that you can play with. So, for instance, one thing that I wanted to have is the ability to load an autosave from in-game without reloading. And this, for instance, apparently is mechanically impossible, because when you load a file, you basically have to be in a lobby. You can't do it in game. I tried, and you will just go in a game, but you won't. Basically, your sessions, your network session number will change, and that will make every single other player disconnect, and you can't give them a number because you don't know it before the game starts. I mean, which is why make it's difficult. But when it comes to this, first move, last move, um, some changes that we did in BBG, some of them were not very popular. For instance, the card exploit. I don't know if you remember, but you could at one point changing your card for free. So this whole mechanics was rendering the planning ahead a little bit useless, and we
Yes.
changed that so it forces player to now plan ahead, and you can't basically stockpile science or culture to then get your policies card for free. And this was a little bit unpopular at first, but then people were easy to, I mean, especially as best player, it was very quick for them to adapt. I believe for first move, last move, it's different because it changes the paradigm on how you play. So I guess it will depend on the situation, and that's why it's a toggle. You can activate it or not activate it. At the moment, it's not working. Just to be clear, so people, you don't need, because it's complicated, and I need to find out a way for giving a sort of promotion to a unit and then removing it after 10 or 15 seconds, which is not so easy to code. But the idea is that maybe some tournament will have a format. So maybe if the Russian guys are playing, they would say, well, if when we organize the current tournament, we want this option on. Maybe on novice it will be by default activated, and maybe when you are casting, the top players, or when they are challenging themselves, they are big boys, right? So they will decide what they want, um, what suits them the best, and it's going to be maybe a decision point, pretty much as like choosing between a Pangea map or a continent map or New Age or something like this. But at least you will have the option, and I guess for players that are playing on computers that are not state of the art, or sometimes you just have a good computer, but you are in London and the host is in New York, and it's good when you're playing with European player, but when you are playing across the Atlantic, it's maybe not that fast. Then maybe in those cases it would make sense to have it activated, to avoid, I would say, an unfair uh, game between players.
I'm always on the side of balancing things out and making it fair for everyone. I guess that's one of the, let's say, fruits of this journey we're having right now, with improving Civilization 6. And it's a bit of, let's see how I can put this. I've been thinking about this. What is our motivation between the players or the members of this community that actually put their extra time and effort into improving a game that not even the game developer wants it this way? And I didn't actually come up with a conclusion, but basically we want this game to be a lot better than it is right now. And I really hope in the end the game developer, the Firaxis, will take notice, and the next version will come with a much friendlier multiplayer scene. It certainly can be seen that a lot of the players, there's a real need for multiplayer. There's a real need for having competitions and having a decently ranked version of a ladder. Um, that's I guess that's our main goal here at CPL, to find that special place for everyone that
And I
can.
think we will get there at the end, Michael, because think about it. Um, if you look, before Civ 3, you simply couldn't play multiplayer. And let's face it, C3 it was play by email. And that was that was really the first time. Civilization at core initially is a first player game, single player game. Um, but you're right in the sense that the scene has been growing, and Firexis, even though you can see that even in the code, they just didn't care, balancing for multiplayer. It was they say it openly, say, well, there will be mode because it's they make a lot of effort to develop this, and then once the game is launched, there is just a skeleton crew team that is in charge of ensuring the bugs are fixed, but they already work in a different project, simply because at the end of the day, it's a business, right? They need to make money, and Take Two is a huge company, and Firexis is one of their studios. They're very successful for a couple of games, but they're probably working on the next version of XCOM, or maybe the next installment Civilization, and but they are listening, and you can see that. For instance, online speed, right? It sounds silly, but at one point, when they decided to make quicker games, they realized that it will increase the appeal for multiplayer. In C5, they had these observers games. Well, I don't know why they didn't put it in Civ 6, but that was other things they implemented as well. So they are listening. Um, Obviously they probably you have to realize that CPL is probably the hardcore core of multiplayer player in Civilization 6. This community, probably CFR and a few other, but it's not their main market yet. Now if it turns out that more and more people are tuning to your stream, Michael, when you're casting games, or I've seen that the tournament over in CVFR has been quite successful with Deluxe and Mal
Mal
casting as well.
and Leech
Yeah,
when
so
he was casting.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So you see, and there, honestly, one of the things that I wanted to say earlier to the player asking the question, I learned so much just by listening to you, just saying, "Oh, this guy is pre-building stuff. Maybe I should use that tactic next game." You see my point?
Yeah, yeah.
So this is, and bear in mind that it's what the community is doing of the games that makes the next installment push toward competitive play or not. StarCraft was like this at the beginning. Um, StarCraft One was a good game, but never thought Blizzard never thought it would turn out in a massive multiplayer franchise. And then StarCraft Two was especially designed with multiplayer in mind. Forget about single player; it was all about multiplayer.
And they
Um,
broke the ceiling with that, actually.
Yes, yes, and it's try and error, and sometimes the video game industry is not the best to be able, I would say, to cater something for the hardcore players. Sometimes they think about the wider audience, and could mention a couple of games like Diablo 3 was a good example. When it get out, a lot of people bought the game, but the hardcore Diablo 2 guys were like frustrated, and now Diablo 4 is going to be catering especially for those guys, hopefully going back to some mechanic. And maybe Civ 7 is going to be like this, or maybe we're going to get a new expansion, and we're going to be all happy because we have a spectator which is built in. That would be great. Um, but to your point, I think we get closer to get a more enjoyable experience, and if we can spend less time in the lobby, I think having the next few games on CPL with the host having this mode would kind of help.
I totally agree with you, and I do believe on that note we should make a closing here. It's been another hour of the Q&A show. We've had here Jack tell us a bit about the new CPL helper mode he's been working on. That's going to be, I think, a great improvement in our gameplay and life. And we got Kono answering some of the questions from Mondala. I do want to especially thank the player Mondala for expressing his opinions and questions and his thoughts about his experience coming here into our community. I do believe we need more players like him to challenge us with questions so we can answer them as best as we can and make appropriate changes in our community as well. We're in a constant change. I'm not sure if you've seen or looked at our news updates. I think we're pushing out 2 or 3 changes per week. We're trying to keep up as much as possible in all areas, in policy, in the mod updates, in getting the tournaments done, finishing the website, in mods, everywhere. It's a long journey, and we're here to get a better experience out of this game overall. Thank you, Jack, for coming.
No problem. Take care.
Take care.